Hi, everyone. Welcome to All Things Breastfeeding. I am Barbara Robertson, and I'm joined by Nancy Moorbacher, and we're here to talk about an interesting study that Nancy found. And Nancy, tell us a little bit about what this study, why it grabbed your attention.
Well, it's a study about the effects of lifetime breastfeeding duration on age at menopause. And that wasn't
Interesting.
something that I was familiar with, so that caught my eye right away.
Yeah, as many of us get older and
Yes.
are more interested in this, yeah, this is something. And so I'm going to go ahead and if you're watching this recording, you'll be able to see the study, but we'll also, if you're listening to this as a podcast, you can, we'll have the study link available for you.
Right,
And so the title of the study is Association of Lifetime Lactation and Characteristics of Menopause, a longitudinal cohort study.
right.
And this is an open access article, which is wonderful. Brand new research that was just put out.
Right.
And
One way to find it, if you are looking for it, is to go into PubMed and just put in the title, which
yep,
Barbara just read if you're listening. So
yeah.
if you do
So
that,
again,
it'll come right up and you can look at the entire study.
yeah, and it has one, two, three, four, five authors on the studies. They have no conflicting conflict of interest. So tell us again. I'm going to go ahead again for those of you who are home. We can see the abstract here. So yeah, obviously it's an interesting subject, but
Mhm.
what really caught your eye about this?
Well, it was a very large study, first of all.
Mm,
They were using data from a large population study that was
right.
done in Alberta, Canada. So it was
Mhm.
almost 20,000 women.
Right.
And they looked at longitudinal, means that it happened over a long period of time. And so they were able to look at the experiences of these women. They part of the survey involved the length of breastfeeding, and they were looking at lifetime breastfeeding duration and what relationship that might have with age at menopause.
Interesting. Yeah, because when we're looking for studies, we're always looking for studies, the larger the population,
Right.
the more we can feel like, okay, this would probably translate to other
Mhm.
populations.
Right. And they did say that there had been a few other studies, and they do talk about them within this paper. But they
Mhm.
said that the results had been mixed. But they did note that the ones that did not share their findings, they did not necessarily control for the right things. And
Mhm.
so they were able to explain why you might see mixed results on this issue.
Right, because when you're doing a study, it's so important that your language is created, that it's correct, that you're
Mhm.
looking at the right things.
Right. And that
Yeah.
you're comparing the right
Okay.
variables.
Yeah. Well, and so what did they find when they looked at these 20,000 women?
Well, what they found was that there was a dose response relationship with
Mhm.
the lifetime duration of breastfeeding and age at menopause.
Yeah.
So they divided the women into different groups in terms of duration of breastfeeding. There was those who breastfed for a month or less, 1 to 3 months, 4 to 6 months, 7 to 12 months, and those who breastfed 13 months or longer. And the ones 13 months or longer were most likely to have to not experience an early menopause. And they defined what something I'd never heard before, which they said there appears to be a biologically optimal age at which menopause occurs, that if it's earlier than this range or later, that there are health risks associated. And this optimal range is somewhere between 50 and 55 years of age.
Hmm.
So they found that the women who nursed longer were more likely to have their menopause within that optimal window of time. So it wasn't just that it pushed it later, because too late is not necessarily a good thing either, but that they were in that window. So in other words, whether the menopause occurred naturally or whether it occurred surgically because there was a hysterectomy or the ovaries were removed or something like that, the women who breastfed longer were still less likely to experience menopause, you know, earlier than 50 years of age.
So what did they, I should know more about this, Nancy, but I don't. What did they define menopause as?
Mhm.
Like when your periods actually stop
Yes, it's when they
completely?
stop, and
Hmm.
they don't consider it that it's actually the last period until at least a year later.
Hmm.
But because they were looking at this longitudinally, over the long haul, that they were able to sort that out for these women. So that is how they define it.
Yeah, this it's like TMI. But I nursed for about 6 years total, and I literally started my last period on my 50th birthday.
Mhm.
So that would put me right in that range.
Yeah, I
Um,
actually nursed 12 years total.
yeah.
And I
You have
had my
more babies
menopause.
than me. Come on, Nancy.
I did. I'm an overachiever always. And I had my menopause at 52, so I was within
Mhm.
that time window also.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
However, let me say,
Mhm.
I did post a link to this study on many Facebook pages, and there was a lot of discussion among lactation supporters. A lot of people who wrote in and said, "Well, that's all well and good, but my menopause happened," and many of them were actually early. And of course, I
Mhm.
think it's important to say that although the risk is
Right.
reduced, it is certainly not a guarantee that you're
Mhm.
going to have the menopause within this ideal time window. So certainly there's going to be people who didn't, but again, it's about a reduced risk of having an
Right.
early menopause.
Well, and did they talk at all about how difficult the menopause might have been? Because there's people that I know
Mhm.
that have a terrible time with menopause,
Mhm.
and then people like myself, I mean, honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal for me.
That wasn't something that they measured.
Yeah, so that would be an
I agree with
interesting
you.
measure.
Menopause was not really a big problem for me either. Although I do remember the years that I was traveling and presenting where, I was taking my jacket on and off like 10 times over the course of the day. And I
I
used
know.
to joke that my inner child was playing with matches.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
but
when
it,
I got my last period on my 50th birthday, I was like, happy birthday to me because
Mhm.
it had been like 6 months. So it was just like, great.
Yeah,
Well, something that's interesting too is the surgical when people have either their ovaries or their uterus removed, because we know from other studies that we're less likely to need that
right.
if
And
we're
they
having
did note,
longer.
yeah, they did note that in this
Mhm.
study that women are, other studies have confirmed that those who breastfeed longer are less likely to suffer from endometriosis and have ovarian cancer, and reasons like that that might cause, an early surgical menopause. So
Okay,
those findings were also reflected in this study.
right. But what was also interesting that you mentioned to me earlier was even like nursing from 4 to 6 months
Right.
made a huge difference.
Right. They started to see a difference in the age of menopause in those who breastfed at least 4 months or
Mhm.
longer. And of course, the longer the lifetime duration of breastfeeding, the more of an effect, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was a dose dependent response. So longer breastfeeding, gave a more striking response to age of menopause.
Wonderful. Well, so why do you feel like this study is important? Why should we care about this
Well,
study?
to me, it's one more maternal advantage
Hmm.
or positive maternal health impact of lactation. For many years, I've been working in the lactation field for 40 plus years now. In the beginning, people thought, oh, breastfeeding, maybe that's good for babies, but it really takes it out of a woman,
Right.
takes it out of mothers. And what we've learned, of course, in recent decades is that actually it has major positive health impacts on women, in terms of, metabolic syndrome, reduced risk of that, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, there's all kinds, diabetes, all kinds of
Right.
things. Because essentially what lactation does is it resets the metabolism after childbirth and, gives you healthier body functions. So
Right.
rather than, it's the opposite of what we used to think that, oh, it really, they used to say with every baby a tooth, meaning like you lose teeth and it's bad for your bone health and all that. And we've really found that none of that is true, that actually lactation is very, very good for the lactating parent.
Yeah, and we have been using the term women because these
Mhm.
were biological females
Right,
that had uteruses, that had ovaries, that were
right,
going through menopause.
right.
And I think that that's something we always, we talk, oh, should we talk about the risks of not breastfeeding or
Mhm.
the benefits of,
Right.
but I think we forget that breastfeeding is what our bodies expect to do. And not everybody chooses to have babies, and
Right.
that's fine. But if you do, it is the end of the reproductive cycle and it
Mhm.
supports normal body function,
Yeah.
healthy
And
body function.
I think when it comes to the whole risk language,
Hmm.
my good friend Diane Wiesinger, who was the one who wrote the original article, called Watch Your
Watch your
Language back in the
language.
1990s, in which she was promoting the idea of this risk-based language, she will tell you that she wanted that language in the research. She wanted researchers and scientists to term things that way. She didn't want, this talk of breastfeeding lowering risk, in a study, because
Yeah,
breastfeeding is the biological norm. And it's not that breastfeeding reduces risk, it's that not breastfeeding increases
increases.
risk. You have to figure
Yeah,
out what is your baseline.
yeah.
And breastfeeding should be the baseline for a mammal, such as we are. But when it comes to talking to parents, the risk-based language, has drawbacks because a lot of people, when we talk about guilt and all that sort of thing, that isn't necessarily the same way that we want to talk to parents and families. So she would say too that we want to tailor our language to our audience.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for bringing this important study to our attention.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. If you want to know more about lacta learning or all things breastfeeding, you can find all things breastfeeding on your favorite podcast listening device, and you can Google lactalearning.com. So thanks again, Nancy, for joining us and talking about the study.
My pleasure.